Joining me now, Washington Bureau Chief for USA Today, Susan Page, who got the exclusive interview with the president, and former FBI General Counsel and former senior member of the Mueller probe, Andrew Weissmann. So, Andrew, let's talk about the legal situation, the Supreme Court request. He's bypassing the New York Appeals Court, going right to the Supreme Court. So is everything on hold until the justices make a decision, or do they have to actually issue a stay for that to take place?
They would technically have to issue a stay. And if they don't do that, then the sentencing is going to go forward. That is scheduled on Friday. The trial court denied a stay. As you noted, the appellate court yesterday denied a stay. And Donald Trump, I think, is simultaneously seeing if the New York Court of Appeals, the final court in New York, would take the case, but also because of the time issue, has gone directly to the Supreme Court. It remains to be seen whether the Supreme Court is once again going to help Donald Trump out and delay the sentencing. Normally, remember, the judge here has said that he's going to give and intends to give an unconditional discharge, the lowest possible sentence, no matter, in other words, this is the best that any defendant could ever hope for at a sentencing. So normally a defendant would sort of be grab it and growl, but here Donald Trump is trying to avoid any sentencing whatsoever. So it remains to be seen. The prosecution has until tomorrow morning to file its opposition in the Supreme Court, and then it will be ready for decision by the Supreme Court of the United States.
And meanwhile, the Justice Department says the Attorney General has decided, first, the Attorney General Garland does have Jack Smith's report, a 2-volume report, and that he's decided to release the January 6th prosecution report, but not the separate report on the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case, while an appeal is pending on 2 of Donald Trump's co-defendants. And there's the whole issue of what Judge Cannon did in Florida. So what are your thoughts? Do you think we'll actually see this, or do you think that Trump still has some options to try to block it from being released?
Well, Donald Trump, once again, could go to the Supreme Court, but we're waiting for the 11th Circuit, the Court of Appeals that oversees the Judge Cannon court, to hear this matter. The government's filing is incredibly strong. What it points out is that Jack Smith had actually recommended that the Volume 2 of the report relating to Mar-a-Lago not be made public because there are 2 defendants who could be prejudiced by it, the 2 co-defendants of Donald Trump. So that was something that was new and makes it really clear that Judge Cannon didn't need to issue her decision. And with respect to the January 6th part, as you noted, the Attorney General has said that he intends to make that public. He obviously has to wait for the 11th Circuit to say that he has the go-ahead, because Judge Cannon sort of preemptively said everything is stayed. That clearly seems like an improvident order on her part. I wouldn't be surprised for the 11th Circuit to say that Attorney General Garland has the go-ahead to go forward with the January 6th report being made public, and it seems highly unlikely that there's any meritorious argument to prevent that from happening.
And Susan, you had one of the only interviews, if not the only interview, with President Biden before he leaves office. Notably, he's not even holding a news conference, which is traditional, which is not great for the White House press corps. But here you are, and there are some big headlines here. Something that was reported that he had alluded to in a conversation, a private conversation with President Obama at Ethel Kennedy's funeral service. He's suggesting he actually could have won the election.
He said he believed he could have won the election in November if he had stayed on the ballot. But that, which is a striking admission, but the more striking one, Andrea, I thought, was when I asked him, do you believe you would have had the vigor to complete 4 more years in what many people think is the toughest job in the world? And he said, I don't know. He said, who the hell knows? And he says, I don't know who I will be at 86 years old, which would be the age he would be leaving us.
Why would he have chosen to run again without the confidence that he could have completed his term?
Yes, it's at odds with the assurances that he gave American voters when he was running. So that is a good question to ask, and it's too bad we don't have a news conference to follow that up.
Is he still angry about the decision to, or does he regret the decision to step down if he thinks he could have won?
when I asked him about his regrets and disappointments, that's not one he named. So perhaps he's come to terms with that. He didn't strike me as angry. He struck me, he was energetic, he was engaged, he was loquacious. But we know that he's disappointed that he's not going to be around, that he's not going to continue to get the second term he had hoped to get. You know, when he looks up from his desk, he's hung this massive portrait of FDR over the mantle of the White House fireplace. So that's what he sees when he looks up. And that is the kind of really consequential president that he wanted to be and that he hopes history eventually will come around to see him as.
And Vaughn Hilliard is joining us. Vaughn, in West Palm Beach, you were at the news conference and asked one of the most important questions of that entire news conference, following up on the president's view towards the Panama Canal and Greenland and, of course, Canada, as to whether he would use economic or military pressure. Talk to me about what he said.
Right. I think that there's a serious question now that is taking place about what the Trump administration actions would actually be taken to acquire Greenland and the Panama Canal and the extent to which military force would be an answer. Of course, he answered to me that he was not under consideration military force to acquire and annex Canada, yet we're talking about a broader conversation about American imperialism, and you and I were talking about this, Andrea, about conquest in the 21st century here. U.S. hasn't acquired territories and land in more than 100 years here, and what Donald Trump is openly suggesting is keen interest in doing exactly that. And in the case of Canada, potentially cutting off imports, which we should note, half of the imports coming to the United States from Canada is oil and gas. So it is not clear the extent to which crippling the Canadian economy to essentially force their hand to cede the land to the United States is a viable move for either land. But in the case of Greenland, I think it's worth noting that Senator Ted Cruz on his podcast in the aftermath of that press conference yesterday, I'll just read the quote directly from him, quote, "The United States acquiring Greenland is a very, very good idea. Acquiring Greenland has enormous advantages to the United States. Number one, Greenland's location on the Arctic is incredibly important from a national security and defense perspective. Undoubtedly, there are going to be serious questions for members up on Capitol Hill as to the viability of this. Obviously, Denmark and leadership in Greenland have been resistant to the suggestion here, but this is a conversation that undoubtedly is going to be a big one here come the swearing in of Donald Trump on January 20th.